Today, Rob and Jordan review the Packers' upcoming free agents, and they will tell you who the Packers need to sign and who they should let walk.
Yeah, I've been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Okay. Hey. Yeah. Ain't no errors, baby, it's a new era. I wake up early feeling rich like I'm cash.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Sounds Gouda. My name is Jordan Olson, and my co-host and best friend over here is Rob Ralph. So, as always, thanks for being here to any new and returning listeners. We are still in football season as, the Super Bowl has yet to be played, but we are already what feels like deep into the Packers offseason. And today we're going to be talking about the Packers free agents. And who they should sign and who they should let walk. But before we do that, just want to remind you that we have new content coming out every Wednesday and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to keep up with us throughout the off season. So, and then for the sake of this episode, we're not really talking about any restricted or exclusive rights free agents. Rob and I both agree that almost all of them will be back for many reasons. The contract that they have, the fact that most of them are foundational or rotational players of some sort. So today's focus is really on the unrestricted free agents, which on paper, there's a few interesting conversations, but overall, I don't think it would be terrible if a lot of them walked out the door, with the exception of one which we've already named. So maybe let's just start there. Brandon McManus, I believe, to be the one guy that the Packers have to re-sign. We talked about it this last pod, but there's no need to restart at kicker and play the kicking carousel and bring in another guy. If the Packers are going to contend the next 2 years, I think that's somebody they just take care of. I see that probably happening to the tune of about 2 years. $8 million, about $4 million AAV, which is like a nice contract for a kicker, but I think well worth it. So you got anything else to add to that, Rob?
No, pretty self-explanatory. We've talked about this before on some previous pods. Make sure to go and check that out. Give us some Mason Crosby-esque type of consistency at the kicker position. He only missed 2 field goals this year. Unfortunately, one of those was in the postseason, but only one in the regular season. He made a couple other game-winning field goals in clutch situations, so he is definitely a must-resign for.
Yeah, so let's jump into some guys that we're going to have some more discussion about. So I think first and foremost, let's talk about Josh Myers. So what do you think? Should the Packers sign him or let him walk?
I am a believer in letting Josh Myers walk, so we'll provide you with a little bit of some context, some consideration here in this debate. So he will be 27 to start this next season. He did have the lowest PFF grade at 54 points. All of our offensive line for the grades for our starting offensive line this year. Jordan, what did you project if they were to bring him back? What do you think a good projected contract would be for him?
Yeah, and all these contract projections, these are really my figures that I put together based on past signings, kind of how I project teams' interest in them moving forward. There's not a lot about the things out there on Spot Track or other projections yet, but I think that Josh Myers, kind of with his inconsistency and kind of just being an average center, I think he's going to garner about a 3-year, $36 million contract. So that's $12 million average annual value, which I see it similar to the John Runyon contract last year. The Giants gave him 3 years, $30 million. He was kind of a league average guard for us. And when you have decisions to make, $10-12 million for an offensive lineman that's average for a team that drafts and develops offensive linemen pretty well, it's a little bit on the steep side. Where this gets tricky, we do have some money to spend. But where this gets tricky is that finding a replacement for him might get a little bit tough. There's really only one true free agent that would be a big upgrade, and then it gets very barren after that, and that's Drew Dahlman, center from Atlanta. He had a 78.8 PFF grade, and he will only be 26 years old, so he'll be a year younger than Josh Myers to start next year. What it's going to take to get him, probably a bigger commitment, in my opinion. 4 years, $53 million, somewhere north of that $13 million average annual value. And then we got the draft. I know you've looked at a couple draft prospects. On paper, there's not a lot of guys in the top 100, according to PFF and some other projections. So, the best guy, according to PFF, is coming in at prospect number 102. The Packers make their weight in drafting offensive linemen in the 4th and 5th round. So, I don't know. Do you think that there's viable replacements in this draft, Rob?
Yeah, I wouldn't definitely consider anybody like a Creed Humphrey. I was really a lot of different people, I'm sure, including you, Jordan, were banging the drum for Creed Humphrey, especially over Josh Myers in that same draft. I believe he did get picked the pick right after or something? Something like that.
Very near after that. His small hands have definitely impacted his illustrious career.
Yeah, no, so just to touch on this really quick too, some prospects that you might want to look at. I've just barely started to comb through the different positions that we need and started to look at some tape from some of these prospects, but some good ones that might be coming in this draft, debatably 3rd, 4th, 5th round, maybe or later, based on some projections. But Slaughter, the center from Florida, is projected to go quote unquote higher, somewhere in those rounds. The center from Ohio State, I believe his name is Seth McLaughlin. I could be wrong. Seth something.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, for the center for Ohio State. Obviously, they just won the college football championship again, so really good offensive line, pretty good center. And then Jake Majors, the center from Texas. Texas, obviously, another team that did really good. So look for him to be a draft consideration as well.
An offensive line prospect from a multi-year starter from a Big Ten school sounds like a future Packers center to me. The Packers have always had success with Big Ten offensive linemen who have been multi-year starters and team captains. And I don't know if McLaughlin has been a team captain, but he sounds like a Packer to me. So I'm not going to give a firm Walker resign on this one because I'm really struggling with it. I think if the Packers are going to, we're going to for the sake of this exercise, but I just want to say this one is really the toughest decision to me. In almost any other year, if there were more free agents or more high-end draft prospects, I would say it would be a no-brainer to let Josh Myers walk. And I think a lot of it's going to be what happens with the contract that he garners. It wouldn't surprise me if the Packers offer him a 2-year, $24 million deal, same average annual value, but kind of protecting themselves a little bit from a long contract if he does not improve. He did show some improvement, but man, I don't know if the Packers are going to spend all this free agent money, though. I would really if they want to get to the level of the Lions and the Eagles, signing Drew Dahlman, man, and he had a 79.8
run block,
PFF run block rating, which I know the Packers want to be a running team. And then he had a 66.6% pass block rating, but the Packers have always been great at coaching up offensive linemen to be pass protectors. So yeah, maybe Drew Dahlman would be a great pick for us. Great pickup for us. I don't know. I'd say that we can do better than Josh Myers, and if we let him walk, we'd be able to find a replacement. So not a must resign, but potentially, depending on contract, consider bringing him back. I think the rest of these will be a little bit more decisive, but let's talk about the linebacker room, Rob. So we've got Isaiah McDuffie and Eric Wilson as 2 free agents. So why don't you talk to me a little bit about where you stand with those 2 players?
Yeah, Isaiah McDuffie, he'll be 26 to start the season. 55.4 PFF grade. There is, I thought at times he played pretty good this year. Definitely more of a run stopper and good tackler than he would be in your coverage and space against some tight ends or running backs or different slot receivers. There is some potential free agent options on here that aren't too bad. Nick Bolton being one of those from the Kansas City Chiefs. He had a 65.4 PFF grade. So there's maybe a potential there if he doesn't get re-signed or picked up by somebody else. Zach Bond from the Philadelphia Eagles. Now they're absolutely going to be nuts to not re-sign him. So I'd basically take him off the board for what he was able to do and provide for the Eagles. You have a Dre Greenlaw, who has got an 82 PFF grade, but considering that he did come off a really bad Achilles injury for the San Francisco 49ers, but we all know what he did against the Packers in the playoff game and picking Jordan Love off. And then an Ernest Jones, from Seattle, who only graded out at a 60.7 PFF grade, but just something to consider for some of those options, and putting another really good quality starter next to Edgerrin Cooper would be ideal. So what are your thoughts on Isaiah McDuffie?
Well, I think about these two players and I think about the room that's going to be there, right? So right now it'll be Edgerrin Cooper, Quay Walker, and Tyron Hopper. And we have no idea what to expect out of Tyron Hopper other than we hope that he, at this point in time, can be a, replacement level linebacker and be that fourth guy. So we don't have a third starter in our base set. To me, I wouldn't mind bringing back McDuffie. He's probably one of the only two, maybe only one of two more players on this list that I probably would re-sign at this point in time because of his age and an upside. I don't mind bringing him back on a cheap, 2-year, $8 million, $9 million deal. But I do think that we could upgrade this position in the draft or free agency and off-ball linebacker. Zach Bond's probably going to get 3 years, $33 million. That could be a splash move for us as well. I think the Packers really want to see Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper on the field a lot. So this is really your third guy. I would re-sign Isaiah McDuffie to a reasonable deal. I'd probably let Eric Wilson walk. He's going to be 31 at the start of the season, really 30 in August, but 31 in September. So I still think he's serviceable. He could find himself back on the roster at a, veterans 1-year minimum deal. But I'd let Eric Wilson walk unless basically he doesn't have a job and we can bring him back for nothing. I would re-sign Isaiah McDuffie. And I'm not giving him a big contract though.
Yep. Another big one to talk about too, with a lot of points to back it up. But how are you feeling here for Eric Stokes and the cornerback depth and free agents specifically?
Yeah, I'm ready to move on from Eric Stokes. I cut our losses from a former first round pick. I don't really need to see another Kevin King situation where we give a guy another 1-year deal to see if he kind of overcomes his injuries and deficiencies. Even as a depth piece, it just encourages the coaching staff to have to try to get him in the mix over the likes of Carrington Valentine and others, right? So, he's still young, but he clearly is not playable out there, in my opinion. There are a lot of options to replace him in free agency. Now, any free agent corner that's worth his weight is going to be an expensive upgrade. There's a number of guys that are approaching 29, 30, like Rasul Douglas and Mike Hilton, and I wouldn't mind signing those guys on some 1-year deals. Rasul Douglas coming back, I think would fit this team quite nicely. I could maybe see signing him to a 2-year deal, but in terms of young improvement, Asante Samuel, he's only 25 years old. He was a guy that the Packers really liked in the pre-draft process. I think he would be a good fit to come in and play either opposite Jair or opposite Carrington Valentine. He's got versatility. Byron Murphy Jr. is a guy that plays for our rival right now that proved that he can really play on the outside. I still think there's some questions about him, but he had a hell of a season. And then you got Carlton Davis and DJ Reed. So I think from an options standpoint, letting Eric Stokes walk, not only because of the free agent options, but the options in the draft. There's a plethora of players in the top 60 prospects that the Packers could add at corner and improve that position. So no more need to be said from me, but I'm out on Eric Stokes.
Yeah, out of these, the one that I would want the most would be DJ Reed. He's going to be quite expensive, I would think, whoever's going to end up getting him. So I don't know if that'll be realistic. There's a plenty of good, I think, options in the draft for cornerback, and you can basically pencil in a high cornerback draft pick. One for sure, if not more than one. But I don't even know how to say his name, but the last name Thomas from Florida State. will be high one. The cornerback Benjamin Morrison, I believe, from Notre Dame. He's another really good one. So there's a bunch of really good depth, and I think there's some really good cornerback type of talent. Trey Amos, I believe, was another one there for, I believe he was Ole Miss. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on that. That might be another really good outside corner. So anyway,
yeah, I like him as a prospect a lot. Yeah,
I do as well, just watching some brief videos on him. But I'd be shocked if they went out and they got like a DJ Reed or Carlton Davis or one of these other ones for a lot of cap space and money.
We'll keep with the cornerback room, and we'll keep these ones brief because I don't think they're big decisions. But Corey Ballantyne and Robert Rochelle. You got any thoughts on those guys, Rob?
No, Robbie Rochelle, the guy with my first name. That's the only reason I love him. No, just kidding. I was really hammering on him because he had a pretty good preseason. We all know the preseason isn't the regular season or the playoffs. And didn't get too much time. I know he contributed more on special teams, but 27 at the start of the season. If anything, you might bring him back on a 1-year vet minimum. Corey Ballantyne, got cooked. Just got taken to school by Jordan Addison this year. And what was it, week 4 against the Vikings? He's 29. He's getting on the other side of that, the too old age bracket, quote unquote. But he's 29 to start the season. He only had a 53.5 PFF grade, but considering depth and possibilities and draft picks and free agents and how it all shakes up, you might bring him back for just some stability and some depth at a cheap, 1-year vet minimum. So.
Yeah, the cornerback room at this point in time looks like this. We've got Jair on the roster, which we've talked about on the show before. Might be better off without Jair on this roster. But then after that, we've got Keyshawn Nixon, Javon Bullard as a slot, and Carrington Valentine. And then if you get rid of Stokes, Ballantyne, and Rochelle, your room is empty. So I'd easily be fine with Ballantyne or Rochelle walking, but you could see one of the guys back on a back-end deal to be your 5th or 6th corner, depending on how the draft happens. So a couple of really one more guy for big consideration, and then some other pretty easy decisions, in my opinion. But TJ Slayton, I've seen a variety of things about TJ. Some people said he had a really good year. PFF actually had him rated as like our worst defender, which I know there's some discussion about, if people really like PFF's grading system or not. But where do you stand on TJ Slayton? Do we re-sign him or do we let him walk?
Yeah, I do love the defensive tackle draft for this upcoming year. There's some really, really good prospects. Alfred Collins from Texas, who's 6'6", 300-something pounds. He reminds me of like a Aaron, I don't know, not Aaron Donald might be the wrong one, but he really big, really long, kind of still a little bit raw. You got Mason Graham from Michigan, who's obviously a stud. He might go in the top 10, top 15, or maybe even top 20, maybe realistically. But he's a stud there. Anyway, this whole defensive tackle room, I'm really, really confident in, and even towards the later back half of the draft, your 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round type of prospects. It's pretty deep is my whole point. So I like TJ Slayton a little bit. I thought he started to pick up a little bit more as the year went on. I think he's a massive body there in the middle, so I think if you let him go, you're going to need to be able to pick somebody else back up that can really be that big bruiser that can stop the middle or can stop runs coming towards the middle or in different types of gaps within the opposing team's running game there. So I think that TJ Slayton, I think it's 50-50. I could see them bringing him back and giving him, I think you put it in here too, but 2 years, $15 million. And then what are you seeing for replacement options as far as free agents go?
Yeah, they might be able to get him a little cheaper than that. Maybe 2 years, 12 is probably the bottom there. But, I think somebody's going to give him some money because there's some value in defensive linemen who can stop the run. But, Milton Williams and Levi Onwuzurike, I totally butchered that name.
That's a tough one.
I actually had pronounced it better earlier, but the Detroit Lions interior defensive lineman, I don't know. Both of those guys, Williams and Onwuzurike, are going to be a little bit more expensive options than TJ Slayton. I think you talked me into letting TJ walk, and I think we can replace him with a younger, more serviceable player in the draft. I don't know that we need to spend there in free agency. I think I'd rather spend my money to bring back Josh Myers or upgrade and go with Drew Dahlman and maybe upgrade the corner position. And, I agree with you. There's plenty of interior defensive lineman options that are younger and probably can give us the same production in the draft. So sounds like Sounds Good is going to say bye-bye TJ Slayton. But we wouldn't be upset if he came back on a reasonable deal either.
Absolutely.
So cleaning up a couple other things really quick. Andre Dillard, we're going to let him walk. He was really a depth experiment this year. And it really not a reason to bring him back. I'd rather draft another tackle and let him compete. And then Tyler Davis and A.J. Dillon, both two players who were on the IR. I like our current tight end room without Tyler Davis. I don't really know why we would experiment with him anymore after all the injuries he's had, and he's going to be 28. And A.J. Dillon is in a tough position. I love A.J. Dillon. We were hoping big things for him, but there's just not a spot for him in this room anymore with Jacobs, Wilson, Brooks, and Lloyd. So it was nice knowing you, A.J. Dillon. Always be the mayor of Door County, and I wish you success wherever you go. Hopefully you get a chance on a 1 or 2 year deal, and it's not with a division rival. But that's where we stand on our free agent decisions. Just a couple other notes. The Packers do have about a little over $40 million of cap space to spend, so we can certainly dabble with signing at least one impact player, one of those corners, maybe upgrade at linebacker or center. But interesting to note, the Vikings, Bears, and Lions all do have more cap space than the Packers. One interesting thing to note, though, Minnesota has to replace 45.4% of their snaps going into free agency, and the Packers need to replace 14.6% of their snaps. So Green Bay has the fewest percent of snaps to replace, and as we've talked about, a lot of those aren't impact snaps anyways. Minnesota's got a lot more questions to answers and holes to fill. So good luck to Minnesota, who, as we've mentioned, is also finished the season as the oldest roster in the NFL. So we'll see if they can repeat next year. But yeah, that's what we got.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming back and taking a listen to us. Just know that we do have new content every Wednesday and Saturday on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We'd appreciate it if you told a friend, a family member, or somebody else that likes to nerd out with the Packers just as much as we do. If you are watching on YouTube, we are on X and on the socials. Jordan is at Olson Jordan, and I am at Sounds Gouda. That should be right down here on the bottom. Feel free to shoot us a message at any time or post something. We'd love to interact with you, and let us know what you think on this. Did we miss a player or two? Was there somebody that you either disagreed with, that you agreed with, maybe have some other thoughts and some different types of considerations on what the Packers should do? We would love to hear from you. But as always, thanks for coming back and taking a listen. We hope that you have a Gouda morning, a Gouda afternoon, and a Gouda night. Take care. Go Pack, go.
Been wanting this shit forever. I've been in the field with whatever they throw at me. Brush it off, pick myself up, moving on to the better. Hey.